Okay, so in this video, I want to go through the 5 different types of LLM apps that I'm seeing. And I'm proposing these as categories to help people think about what they're actually building with LLMs. Which of these categories does it fall into? And then in the future, we can look at some of the best practices around building each of these types of categories. So, of course, there'll be some apps that overlap from one to another. I find that generally most of the apps that I'm seeing people and companies build fall into one of these 5 categories that we can look at here. All right, so the first category is actually quite simple. This is like chatbots and conversational agents. So people have been doing this for a long, long time, over 10 years, but it's really only been with the advancement of things like the GPTs and the better quality large language models from the big providers and from open source that have suddenly made these things start to be viable and start to work here. So conversational agents can mean everything from virtual friends through to customer support, through to anything that you basically interact in a conversation as if it were a person in many ways. People are using these a lot for things like customer support, like appointment setting, also using them for outreach to people. Sometimes the conversation won't be just like a simple sort of chat style. It'll be something like emails going back and forth. But the idea here is that the conversation is being driven by the agent in response to a human here. So a lot of the ideas here have been promised for sort of 10, 15 years. But in the past, they've been very limited to only being able to work in very closed domains for very specific kinds of conversations. They were very much heuristic and rules-based approaches that didn't have a lot of flexibility. So this changed, obviously, with 2 main models. So probably one of the first ones that had changed with this was a model called Lambda, which was Google internal only. And also, obviously, the big one that it changed with was ChatGPT, which was available to the public. Both of these models suddenly had the ability to have wide open domain conversations in a way that people felt like they were actually interacting, if not with another human, then with something that had the ability to hold a coherent conversation and advance that conversation and return back interesting answers through this. So this has really opened up, a whole bunch of different opportunities for people to build apps around better customer service, sales, virtual friends, virtual dating partners, coaches, a whole bunch of things around this kind of topic. If you are looking to build an app like this, some of the key things that you want to think about, things like the personality of the bot, what the bot will actually engage in conversation in and what it won't engage in conversation. What is the outcome of the conversation? So if you're doing a customer service bot, you're ideally trying to help the person get the result that they want as quickly as possible and then end the conversation. If you're building a virtual friend, you probably want to keep it going on. And then you want to think about, okay, how are you going to store a sort of memory that when humans have conversations together, they're able to store different memories over time and to be able to bring that back up and follow up and ask questions and stuff like that. Conversational agents are a very interesting kind of application for large language models. It's certainly one of the ones that has kind of amazed people a lot. The whole sort of idea for a long time of the Turing test of being able to have a conversation with a bot that you couldn't tell if it was human or if it was a bot. In many ways, we're there. If you know how to trick these things, you certainly can trick them. But for a lot of people, they're having conversations with these things and treating them as if they were another human being. All right. The second kind of large language model app that we're seeing a lot are the whole sort of co-pilots and duets. So I've taken the names from Microsoft and Google who really sort of push these ideas of basically having a co-pilot or a duet, an assistant that is like there to help you as you go through this. So the idea of a co-pilot or a duet is that it's able to make use of your current data and your knowledge around a customer to help customers achieve goals easier and faster. So there are 2 main types of co-pilots. The first one is the ones that we're seeing a lot that are being embedded into different kinds of software, different kinds of SaaS applications, different kinds of online tools. And what these are doing, they're basically using a lot of current data that the company has about the customer. So things like customer knowledge, analytics, that kind of stuff, to be able to help customers achieve their goals much easier. So these kind of co-pilots are ones that can do a set of very specific tasks that are generally going to be limited to a product. These kind of apps and these kind of products favor incumbents and big companies much more than smaller startups. It's a much harder play for a startup to do something like this, just because the big companies have so much data about people using their tools, about people using their software, and they can work out, okay, what do people want to do with this? And then they can set up sort of like interactive guides and interactive points of discovery to help the customer out with the particular task that it is that they're doing. The other kind of co-pilot that we're seeing, which is very interesting. So this is kind of like a subgroup, second subgroup in co-pilots. And this is the whole ideas around curation and guidance, usually for things like education learning apps. So here where you may not have a specific set of tasks around a piece of software, but you've got a specific set of tasks around learning a subject or learning a particular topic. And these education apps will be able to guide your journey through that learning and curate what they're actually showing you, exercises that they're giving you, a whole bunch of different things like this. One of the great examples of this has been the Khan Academy Amigo app, where they're basically using it to teach children. And the whole idea is that the app can adapt to the level of the learner in this sort of case. I think this is one of the areas that startups can get involved with. This is something that we're going to see a lot more in the future for these kinds of apps going forward. Okay, the third category of these LLM apps are the whole sort of chat with data, or RAG. So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation here. These apps are becoming very popular, and we've seen a lot of people do things like chat with PDF, chat with your SQL database, chat with all different kinds of things here. The idea here is that we've got some sort of information retrieval system. The user is then able to use a large language model to access the information that they're most interested in that system and to be able to bring it back, answer questions. One of the key things with this is that it allows for natural language interaction with large data. This can be used for a whole bunch of things. Mostly it's going to be things around question and answering stuff. So allowing users to access data quickly to be able to do this kind of thing. Startups are definitely trying to do these kind of apps. Startups are finding two main issues with these kind of apps. So the first one is that if you're basically just putting together a very simple RAG system, you're not much more than a wrapper around an API, and you have very little moat. So OpenAI introduced their GPTs a month or so ago. And at that stage, people realized that all these chat with PDF apps were kind of like out of business overnight, because really they weren't bringing anything to the table apart from a very simplified system for doing retrieval augmented generation. The second point with these apps is that doing really good high quality retrieval augmentation is very difficult. And it's something that often needs to be highly customized to the specific topic that you're working on. So this is not something where you can just bang out a little bit of code and then expect it to work for lots of different scenarios and different situations. So these chat with data apps suffer usually from two things. Either one, there's no moat at all for defending them, in that they can just be reproduced in an hour or so. Or the second one, that they're just okay or good at things that are very surface level in that topic, and they're not fine-tuned for the actual end use that people are going to be using it for. So the fourth and fifth type of apps, not things that consumers necessarily notice as much. These are things where the large language model is being used a lot more in the background than just the interaction with a consumer, with a user, with something like that. So the fourth type are basically all your traditional NLP tasks. So for a long time, people developed models where they had individual models for doing named entity recognition, an individual model for doing sentiment, an individual model for doing data extraction. And more people are finding that these large language models are just better at all of these tasks. So you're getting to the point now where you can use a large language model to do something like co-reference resolution and work out in a sentence when somebody says, it or they or he or she, what actually are they referring to that came before this? When they're looking at sentiment to try and work out, okay, is this neutral sentiment? Is this positive? Is this a positive review? Is this a negative review? How much should we prioritize a response to this based on how annoyed or angry the customer is? All of these things are things that large language models are proving to be very good at. Another one that's huge area is the whole thing of data extraction. So this is both getting data out of things and also in many ways converting unstructured data to be structured data. So these sort of NLP tasks were things that, like I mentioned in the past, people would develop a whole model around it. They would highly specialize in one particular task. But more and more, we're seeing that large language models have the ability, especially if fine-tuned, to be able to do lots of these tasks and achieve better and state-of-the-art results for these particular tasks. The fifth type of LLM app that I'm going to talk about is probably my favorite. It's the thing that I've been working on most for the past 6-8 months. And these are autonomous agents. So the whole idea here is that rather than just have a conversation with a large language model or with an app that's using a large language model, you're actually getting these apps to autonomously do different tasks. So the big thing here is automation, right? This is the key idea, is that you're trying to basically automate some result by using large language models to do reasoning and decision here. So the whole idea is that sort of humans are not needed. These agents are apps that have the ability to use reasoning and decision making. They're usually going to be very modular. So currently, with the state of language models that we have, you don't want to make one agent do too many things. You tend to want to make them modular and make lots of mini agents. And then you want to basically give them ability to do things like having self-reflection, recursive improvement, for checking their own work. And surprisingly, it turns out that these large language models are often much better at looking at something and then critiquing that and then improving that than just being able to come up with it. So as humans, we would think of that, okay, if I ask the model to do some kind of reasoning, it's going to give me the best that it could. More often than not, you would often find that by having another agent using the exact same large language model check that reasoning and work out what could be improved in that reasoning, you end up getting much better results. So these autonomous agents are still new. People are trying to put them into production for a variety of different things. One of the challenges that they have is that you do need to have state-of-the-art models for the reasoning and decision making. This is one of the tasks that, unfortunately, a lot of the open source models are still not good enough at doing. So it requires things like the latest Gemini models, like the latest GPT-4 models and stuff for doing this. Or it requires highly fine-tuned models for very specific types of reasoning and decision-making. I do think that this is the area that startups and that we're going to see the most amount of growth over the next year or two as people start building these things. Certainly, like I mentioned earlier, it's certainly the area that I find most interesting with large language models. And it's one of the areas that the most amount of research is actually going into for these things. So very interesting times. Anyway, just to recap quickly, the 5 types of LLMs are your conversational chatbots, your copilots and duets, with there being 2 types, one sort of helping people with specific tasks and software. The other ones being more for education, curation, guidance. The third type being chat with data apps. Fourth type being the traditional NLP tasks apps. And then the last one being the autonomous agents with these. Going forward in the future, I do want to spend a lot more time making some videos of how you would structure some of these particular apps and some of the thinking about how you actually go about building some of these apps for this kind of thing. Anyway, as always, if you've got any comments or questions, I'd love to engage with you in the comments. So please leave a comment below. If you found the video useful, please click like and subscribe, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye for now.